Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about a new guy for us, a guy named Winthrop. And he and his fellow Puritans sailed to establish a model Christian commonwealth that they hope would serve as an example to England. So somebody read that on the screen for me.
Winthrop was chosen to serve as governor of the fledgling Puritan colony. On board the flagship Arbella, Winthrop wrote a sermon titled "A Model of Christian Charity," aka the city upon a hill, reminding them of their covenant with God. He urged his fellow travelers to honor their duties and obligations, or surely we shall perish. Yet underlying this warning was a message of hope. Drawing also upon the book of Deuteronomy, he concluded, "Let us choose life that we and our seed may live by obeying his voice, cleaving to him, for he is our life and our prosperity."
Good, thank you, little Bill. So this is a typical ship that could have been the Arabella. The model of Christian charity, that sermon created a compelling vision for a future American society. And he borrowed it from Matthew 5:14. We have heard it used in our government out of context several times, but this is the original presentation that was made. On April 8th, 1630, is the flagship of 4 vessels that carried 700 Puritan immigrants. Now, you remember we had differentiated between Puritan and Pilgrims during the last meeting. You remember that, guys?
Yep. Yes, sir.
You remember what the Puritans were? Who were they?
Well, they were trying to purify their beliefs where they came from.
Yeah, in the English, yeah. Now, and who were the Pilgrims then?
They're-
Hey, Dan, is it safe to say they were the ones that took it to America?
That's a pretty safe one, yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna say Jesus.
Yeah, well, that you're right, Frank. That's exactly right. They brought Jesus to America, right? Okay, well, all right. Well, I could tell that it's not a major concern. On board was a lawyer named John Winthrop and his 2 young sons. He was prepared to preach one of the most influential sermons in American history. This was said about that. One of the most persistent images in American urbanism is that of the proverbial city on the hill, as first envisioned by the shores of the Puritan John Winthrop. View his Gospel of St. Matthew. He charged to his fellow settlers as an example of a sense of visionary definition. Somebody read this excerpt from his sermon for me.
For we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill. The eyes of all the people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, we shall be made a story and byword throughout the world. We shall open the mouths of enemies to speak evil of the ways of God. We shall shame the faces of many of God's worthy servants, and cause their prayers to be turned into curses upon us, till we be consumed out of the good land whither we are a-going.
The only way to provide for our is to follow the counsel of Micah, to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. For this end, we must knit together in this work as one man. So shall we keep the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. So what do you grasp out of this excerpts from his sermon? what jumps off the page at you?
Well, they want them to be a light to the world, I guess.
Through their actions.
The mic pulled out. Uh,
You
They,
hear-
they want us to be an example. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably true. What else? Anything else jump out at you?
Yeah, they're supposed to live their Christianity.
Yeah, very good. Supposed to live it. Now, one thing that did jump off the page at me is that the eyes of all the people are upon us. You know, with the idea of the immigrants coming across our southern borders from so many different countries, that I think holds to be more so true now than before. And the other countries are all observing and watching us. If you notice during newscasts or film of other countries, like I was watching one the other night, and there was some excerpts from the Middle East, you know, and there were several people there that had on things like one guy had on a shirt that said had Los Angeles Lakers on it. Another guy had a shirt that had the Dodgers on it. You know, they're dressing like Americans. We have a great influence on the world, actually. And you know, if we're such a bad country, then why does everybody want to try to come in the door? It says here, we shall shame the faces of many of God's worthy servants and cause their prayers to be turned into curses upon us till we be consumed out of the good land, whether we are or in or not. So, you know, we have to be observant that along with privilege comes responsibility. And along with what we have, God has blessed us with, we have to be good stewards of what he's blessed us with. So, you know, being a city on a hill is more to it than just the light and pointing to it. I found several monuments that were posted. Puritan leaders, writers, and speakers developed literary and theological parallels to the people of Israel and the Exodus agreement with God, to go on an unknown place and live out a calling that they believe prophetically had been placed on them. So Winthrop's house is noted, and that he was the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was a chartered arrangement. One of the founders of Boston and of the first church in Boston, 1630 and 50. Winthrop's sermon to his Puritan peers laid out the principles and rules which should govern their living relationship with each other and with God. But trying to be an example every day, the rest of the world in this new world experiment, showing how society should be for those saved souls who are to please God. How do you think we're doing today in being that and showing the society we have now? How you guys think we're doing?
Not, as a whole, we're not.
We're not doing very well, that's for sure. So Winthrop, you know, what I am showing you some things that we don't know from day to day whether those things are going to be up or not, because the way things are going, if certain associations and groups are aware of these monuments, you know, they could be gone tomorrow. I don't know if you guys saw on the news the other day about the university that had the boulder. Anybody see that? Well, I forgive me for not remembering or taking the note of which university it was, but there was a university that had this boulder on it. The boulder was almost 20 feet high. And it was on their campus because it was a boulder that was significant in geology. And in 1924, the new president of that university was trying to help grow and develop the engineering department of that school. And so he decided to try to promote mining and minerals and engineering. And he had this boulder found that they found delivered to the campus and put on the campus. And because of that being a unique landmark, the university named that boulder after the president. And somehow or another, later on in 1929, a newspaper journalist wrote an article that was published in the paper that was talking about the president of the college or university at that time, who the boulder was named after, was a racist. That was in 1929. So somehow this year, someone had picked up the name and named it the racist boulder. And because it was named the racist boulder, you get the drift. One of the organizations filed a complaint against it and filed a lawsuit to prevent federal funds to being distributed to the university because they promoted racism. And so last week, the boulder was hauled off and removed from the campus. So,
You can't make this stuff up.
oh, you cannot. That's for certain. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's look at John 8:32 for the second one here. Somebody read 8:31 and 32 for me on the screen.
So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Are these these verses familiar to you? You've heard these 100 times. Well, this is the story here for you about Harvard University, 1636. At the time, Harvard College. There's a plaque that's awarded. You can read that for yourself by the Massachusetts Bay Company, by the way. Agreed to give 400 pounds towards a school or college, and it was to be paid the following year. And there's the layout for it. So talking about the founding of the university or the college at the time. Here's the way that was coming down from England at this particular time. 189,000 were eventually to find their way westward. 110,000 of those went to the West Indies. 4,000 went to Bermuda, and 75,000 came to America. Here's another plaque about New England's first fruits. After God had carried us safe to New England and we had built our houses, provided necessaries for our livelihood, regarding convenient places for God's worship, and settled the civil government, one of the next things we longed for and looked after was to advance learning and to perpetuate it to posterity, dreading to leave an illiterate ministry to the churches when our first ministers shall lie in dust. So what I wanted to point out to you is that the whole purpose and the founding of Harvard College was to teach pastors to become ministers. 1629, the non-separatists, the Puritans that wanted to clean up the act of the Church of England, got a royal charter to form the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They came, 1,000 set off in well-stocked ships, 1629, and the Great Migration was on in 1630. So here's the guy that the school is named after, John Harvard. And the reason why the school was named after him was because that when he died, he bequeathed all his property and his library of 300 books to the new college. And so appreciation for that, the school was named after him. So you could imagine it was about the size of the school at that particular time. Now, there was eventually published a handbook about the statutes and laws of Harvard College. This is before it was a university. The doors opened and the student handbook is published. And here's what it said. Somebody read that for me.
Let every student be painfully instructed and earnestly pressed to consider well the main end of his life and studies to know God and Jesus Christ, which is eternal life. And seeing the Lord only giveth wisdom, let one seriously set himself by prayer in secret to seek it of him. Everyone shall also exercise himself in reading the scriptures twice a day, that he be ready to give such an account of his proficiency therein, both in theoretical observation of the language and logic, and in practical and spiritual truths, as his tutor shall require, according to his several ability. Seeing the entrance of the world giveth light, it giveth understanding to the simple.
And that's Psalm 119, Proverbs 2:3, John 17:3. These were all published in the student handbook at the founding of the school. The motto of the university, adopted in 1692, was Veritas Christo Ecclesia, which means truth for Christ and the church. Truth for Christ and the church. Now notice that the three books spell out Veritas, about truth, and the banners spell out Christo Ecclesia. So the original purpose of Harvard's founding, the fellowship is dedicated to discovering and experiencing truth for the sake of Christ and his church. With the secularization of the school, currently the shield contains only the word Veritas. So they got rid of Christo Ecclesia so that Christ and the church would not be on there. This was initially founded as a seminary. Originally, the motto was followed by an explanatory reference to John 8:32, which provides the only sure foundation for sound education. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. This is the founding of what has now become an extremely liberal university. And gradually over time, they chip away. They get rid of Christo, they get rid of Ecclesia, they get rid of the motto, they get rid of the association for the founding and the reason for it. It bears remembering that the first educators in America and the founders of our great institution of learning were anchored to their conviction of objective, absolute truth based on the reality of God and the trustworthiness of Scripture. Now, do you believe that absolute truth is taught at Harvard University today?
No, I don't think so.
I don't either. So that's the story of the two guys is very brief for you, but I wanted you to know of the essentials. Let me stop sharing here. There we go. Of the essentials of two verses that we are so familiar with that we hear and see just about every week, somewhere, somehow. They're verses that our politicians use indiscriminately for their own purposes, for inspiration. But somehow or another, it loses its original context. It gets swept under the rug, and the real viewpoint of what they're there for and the tradition of following them. I mean, 1628. Are you kidding me? 300 years? I mean, that's a pretty viable tradition, if it were held true. But, you know, Satan over the years chips away at stuff, and man is desperately wicked in his heart. And he likewise changes things so that he is not accountable to God, and then he's not accountable to other men.